you see the title, that means comparative literature in Western, American, and European and Indian literature, or other African literature, or Asian literature as a whole. Okay. So at the initial stage, actually comparative literature started its journey after the remark done by Matthew Arnold in 1857. He said that everywhere there is a connection. Every literary piece there is a connection. Okay. And next time we have seen that Goethe, he said that yes, now whenever we will be reading a literature on isolated perspectives, the field will be rather narrow. If we put one literature at the side of other literature of other languages, then the literature will get its true shape. That means a broader perspectives. And for this reason, comparatist, that means if you compare one literature with other literature, you can be called comparatist. Comparatist will have to be diversified. Will have diversified knowledge, especially he or she has to know many languages, many cultures, many skills to study the literature across culture. That means transgressiveness. In order to overcome the boundary, national boundary, in terms of literature, you have to go beyond the boundary line, and especially that comment was done by Matthew Arnold and Goethe. Okay, that you have to put your literature, that means your national literature, or you have to put Bengali literature out of country's boundary. Then the literature will go in exact shape. And I have said that comparative literature, after the remark of Matthew Arnold and Goethe, it started a journey in such a way. But as human minds are always enthusiastic about the new genres. So in 1970 decades, in European countries, at the beginning of 1950 decades, many Western and European universities, they had been opening courses on comparative literature. But at the end of 1970 decades, 1970 সালের দিকে এসে আমরা দেখলাম some other genres, that means gender studies, media studies, cultural studies, post-colonial studies, translation studies, eco-criticism, these are the diversified subjects they are introduced. That means that Western people and the European countries and the universities, they got interested in this field, that means media studies, cultural studies, gender studies, translation studies, eco-criticism, like that. So what happened to comparative literature then? Comparative literature moved towards the other parts of this world. In Indian perspectives, what happened there? The work of Indian comparative literature offered a change in attitude and perspectives. Okay, comparative literature stopped or declined interest in Western and European countries, especially in European countries. But in India, they saw comparative literature in a new perspective. What is the perspective? Whenever Western and European graduates were moving on to new discipline like gender studies, cultural studies, their attitude to comparative literature were being scrutinized and observed from outside. Okay, so they were not interested now at comparative literature, so they were observing from outside. But in Indian perspectives, Mojumdar, he is a writer as well, tried to define Western literature from geographical perspective. Indian scholars Mojumdar, Shapon Mojumdar, exact নামটা হলো Shapon Mojumdar, he said that try to define Western literature in the Western perspectives. Let's see an analogy done by Mojumdar. Mojumdar said that Western literature is derived from Greco-Roman tradition of Christianity, and at the same time English literature is being derived from French and German tradition. He said that Western, that means most of European literature, they have derived their literary speech, the information, the issues they have written in their literature. Actually, this is not their exact national literature. This is borrowed from the Greco-Roman tradition. What happened to English literature? English literature, he said that English literature, William Shakespeare and other famous writers, Chaucer and other writers, they say that, Majumdar says that they have borrowed the materials from French and German tradition. So, which one we calling English literature? What we call now today. So, Western and English do not have their national literature. Specific, the literature that is produced in England or in UK, Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England, they lose their identity. And in the truest sense of term, on the contrary, Western and English literature can be called sub-national literature. What does it mean? It means that they have written literature, and means Western, English and the other countries, England and the other countries, they have produced literature borrowing materials from Greco-Roman perspectives. So this, the tales, the folk tales, the story are borrowed from other perspectives. If it is borrowed from others' culture, then it is not their national culture. So their literature can be called sub-national literature. Who said? Majumdar said this. That means an Indian scholar. Majumdar said that comparative literature to a radically alternative need and the revolutionary discourse of national literature. Before the speech of Shapon Majumdar, comparative literature was in a field. But after the speech or the comment of Shapon Majumdar, national literature got another entity. What is the entity? National literature, comparative literature can be called in another term, that is the national literature. In which way? That means, we see, while West makes the division of great literature as well as majority literature and minority literature, Majumdar articulates comparative literature as an action of comparing between national and sub-national literature. In post-colonialism, there is a term that is called other. What is other? The Western people, they think that we are white people, we are the great. We are the great in terms of civilization. That means we know the light of civilization. We discovered electricity, we discovered locomotive of train, we discovered others, radio frequency and everything. And for this reason, we are the superior in according to the knowledge of civilization. And apart from us, other people are other. That means they are not, they are other. They said this other. And this other term means that they are inferior. So they make a division between superiority and inferiority. In comparative literature, Shapon Majumdar divided comparative literature as national literature and sub-national literature. If English or England or the European countries, if they do not have national literature, then they have lost the identity of their literature. Okay, so he divided literature, comparative literature as national and sub-national literature. So, sub-national literature, West and the European and the English literature lost their identity in such a way. Because they have borrowed the story, they have borrowed the resource or the materials from the Greek Roman civilization, from the countries, from the folk tales of other parts or other countries. So in this regard, they don't have the identity actually. And discourse of the national language literature gets diffused and reinforced. So here, refueled and reinforced. Reinforced. Okay. Another Indian literature, actually he is a British, Indian born British, Bhumike Bhabha. You have heard her name. So he said, he or she, he said echoes a quite similar attitude. That means quite similar to Majumdar. He said that his new emphasis on post-colonial literature, Humi Khe Bhaba, suggests cross-reference can be termed as cross-cutting of the social significance, which undermines the diverse culture and ethnic relevance. Okay, so whenever you will divide the literature from major literature and minor literature, that means you are discarding the importance of other literature. So cross-reference in any term, that means national and subnational, major literature and minor literature. In which way you will be calling one literature a major? In which way you will be calling another literature minor literature? You can't write so. So if you call one literature a minor literature, that means you want to disregard the importance of the national literature. Humi Khe Bhaba said so. Development of comparative literature beyond Europe and North America clears all kinds of assumption and confusion with which were created for the discourse of Eurocentric literature. So they say, that means the European and the Western people, they say that the literature is inborn capabilities, that they have the inborn capabilities to produce great literature. And this is called the Eurocentric norms of superiority in terms of literature. They say that our literature are great. But whenever the issues, that means the national literature came into discussion, then their European and the Western literature lost their identity. And it also create a push towards Eurocentric norms of superiority. That means their literature is not superior. Their culture is not superior. So through the comparative literature, we are getting so many branches and so many discussions are there. Because what is the point? That means you have to put your literature. How you will be calling your literature great? I will be calling Bengali literature great. He will be calling French literature great. But in which way? Whenever I will be putting my literature, that means Bengali literature, at the side of German literature, then we can make an analogy. That what is the good side of that literature and what is the bad side of my literature. So before that you can call that one literature is great and another literature is minor. Okay. So that came into discussion. Another person, yeah. William Senga, Nigerian playwright, and he is also a Nobel laureate in African perspective. A whole range of African critics brought light to the extensive influence and comment of German philosopher Friedrich Hegel. Ole Senga, he commented Hegel. Hegel put another comment. Actually, Ole Senga put comment against Hegel comments. What was Hegel's comment? Hegel, you know, German philosopher. Hegel, he said that African culture is weak. And if anybody's culture is weak, their literature is also weak. Okay, you can't say so. Hegel did that. In contrast to higher and more developed culture, in which way you will determine the value that their culture is higher and our culture is lower? Amar Fagun Amari Dhaka. কি জানো বলে গেলাম সময় কমে গেছে, মানে সময় আমরা শুরু করেছি পরে, না হলে গানটা মনে আসতো যে কি জানো, ফাগুনে আমার সুখ, আমার স্বপন আমারই থাক, আবার স্বপন যদি পিছু দেয় ডাক, ফিরিয়ে নিব মুখ, ফাগুনে আমার সুখ, আমার স্বপন আমারই থাক, এরকম আর কি। দ্যাট মিনস হোয়াট এভার মে বি আওয়ার কালচার, ইট ইজ গুড। I love my culture. Okay, in my culture, I don't call our teachers in the first name. We don't call our teacher, hey Salam, how are you? But they say, hey Robert, thank you for doing us, how are you? Good morning, good evening, like that. Okay, so they will be calling their senior, even he or she might be in his or her grandfather's age. It doesn't matter, but they will be calling another person with their first name. Robert Williams, so they will say Robert. এবং রবার্টের বয়স যদি কারো দাদার সমানও হয়, দাদির সমানও হয়, কোনো সমস্যা নেই, কিন্তু বাবা কি না It is their culture. But we show respect to our senior. For this reason, আমি বলি কি আপনি এবং স্যারেদের আমরা নাম ধরে ডাকি। Okay. So it is not right. So in which way you can call my culture minor, inferior? Hegel said so. That African culture is weak. What does it mean? Their culture is great. This means Hegel denied the standard African historian culture. Whenever Hegel said this. And Ole Sanka pointed that, this African Nigerian writer. He commented, no, you can't tell so that your culture is great and another culture is. Actually, you can have a look to Hegel. So this is about Hegel and Ole Sanka. Next time we have got another anthropologist, actually Canadian anthropologist, James Sneatt, Department of Anthropology, California State University. He says, attacking Hegel's point out that the fact of late 20th century European culture is its ongoing reconciliation with black culture. Okay, the fact is that actually, you know monopoly? Monopoly means in the market there is no competitor. Before the Commune, before 1950 decades, maximum countries were under British rule or Spanish rule or German rule or some other countries subordinate, isn't it? After 1950 decades, every country were getting freedom. Indian subcontinent got freedom from British rule in 1947. In the same way, Commonwealth was established in 1955. That means after 1955, there was no country under Great British or German or Spanish rule. এখন তো যখন স্বাধীনতা লাভ করলো তখন প্রত্যেকটা দেশের কি হলো আলাদা আলাদা কালচার তৈরি হলো, সংস্কৃতি তৈরি হলো, নিজস্ব সাহিত্য তৈরি হলো, ভাষা তৈরি হলো। ওকে, এখন the European monopoly regarding civilization culture got hindered by the existence of so many countries, so many cultures. Okay, and for this reason, they are trying to pinpoint that now they have their culture, but their culture is weak and our culture is. Their literature is weak, our literature is weak. So this is the way they have seen. And that was pointed out by Canadian anthropologists. Yes, actually, the fact that late 20th century European culture is its ongoing reconciliation with black culture. The African people, Ole Sanka, Africa, he is from Nigeria. So here, black people, whatever may be their skin color, but they have their culture. They have an ethnic boundary. They have a identity. In no way you can call that their culture is minor. So, European culture, why you are great? They have to reconcile with the existence of other culture with the other parts of this world. After in the late 20th century, the separation between culture are perhaps all along not one of nature but one of force. Okay, that means we have no story that is একটা মেষ শাবককে বাঘ খেতে যাচ্ছে, ঠিক আছে, সে পানি খাচ্ছে, তখন বাঘ দিয়ে তাকে তো কোনো কিছু তার উপরে আরোপ করতে পারে, হ্যাঁ, বলছে আমি তোমাকে এখন খেতে চাই, তখন মেষ শাবক বলল কেন তুমি আমাকে খেতে চাও, বলছে যে তুমি আমার পানি ঘোলা করেছো, বলছে আমি তো মাঠাতে আছি, আমি কিভাবে আপনার পানি ঘোলা করবো, বলছে না না তুমি করবে, তোমার মানে in any way we want to dominate the minor ones. Okay. So that is happening, and every discussion was started with the instruction or the inception of this course that is comparative. If we are not in a way of studying comparative literature, so we will not be comparing culture, we will not be comparing ethics and morality and the other norms and values of the people living in the other parts of this world. So the difference between cultures is not out of choice, out of nature, but it is out of force. I have strength, I can call that yes, you are weak. In no way, there is no logic. Okay, so might is the right. Thus, the picture of comparative literary study changes according to the places where it is taking place. So the Eastern perspective, they had been calling world literature, great literature, minor literature, major literature, like that. But in case of Indian perspectives, they come up with a new identity, that is the national literature. So national literature came into discussion after the comment of Shapon Majumdar, Homike Bhava, and Olesneka. Okay, so in Indian, it has got a new entity. Comparative literature has got new identity with this comment. African, Indian, Caribbean critics have challenged the refusal of Western literary criticism to accept the implications of their literary and cultural policy. So except European and the Western critic, the other parts critic, they started to criticize the way I have said. That means in which way you can call your culture great, in which way you can call your literature great. Especially Shashamdar mentioned that you don't have your own national culture. You have borrowed many things from other cultures. So in which way you can say so? Got it? That is the point. British literary theorist and critic Terry Eagleton, most probably his yes, Terry Eagleton. He said that literature is inherited what, which means an ideology. Indian Shopabandha said one thing. Now British. So up to this we had been talking about the Western European. Not even a Canadian anthropologist commented, supporting Homike Bhava and disregarding Hegel's comment. Here British critic, he said that actually literature is not inherited something. That means you are being producing literature. Once upon a time you did well in literature, so you will be producing, your next generation will be producing good literature and get it, not like that. He said that it means an ideology. It means an identification. So in the literature, it is said that if we study the literature, okay, so when in 1977 there was so ওই সময়কার পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে ওই লিটারেচার লেখা হয়েছে এবং এই জন্য if we study a literature of a specific time we can see that what's going on at that time. Simply reading this line you can see that there was a okay, and for this reason literature is the identity. Literature can in another way can be called that literature is the showroom of a generation, of a showroom of a specific time and place, what was going on over there. In such a way we will see that. So Terry Eagleton says that it is an ideology. Literature is an ideology, it is an identification, you can say so. Terry Eagleton, the emergence of English as an academic subject in the 19th century had a quite clear political implication. That means after the First and the Second World War, England became more powerful. And at the time, many countries were under the direct rule of England. And England's language is English. And for this reason, English became the literature of the most powerful nation. আমরা তো সবাই শক্তের ভক্ত. All world they started to pay homage to European language, especially English language, and as well as their literature. So literature after the First World War was the literature of the great force. It was not by their liking. তাদের নিজের পছন্দ হতো না, বরঞ্চ এটাকে একটা শক্তিশালী দেশের একটা লিটারেচার হিসেবে সবাই গ্রহণ করেছিল. The establishment of English subject at universities was the result of vast social changes brought about the aftermath of the First World War. So many universities at the time started teaching a department, opening a department, English department. Still, we have the name of the department, English department. What does it mean? English department. Okay. And for this reason, many countries have changed the name of their department. Okay. So, but it is why it had created? It had created after the result of the First World War. So English became the language of the most powerful countries, and for this reason English department should be open, and they opened it. This is not by their choice, it is for the sake that this is the literature of the great people, powerful people. So Eggleton was quite democratic in his comment. Actually, he has pointed the issue why we see so many English departments all over the world. Okay, the Great Wire causes chauvinism, excessive and exaggerated self-love. প্রত্যেকটা কান্ট্রি সেকেন্ড ওয়ার্ল্ড ওয়ারের পরে যেটা হলো, প্রত্যেকটা কান্ট্রি, কোনো দেশ যদি কেউ সবচেয়ে বেশি নিজেকে ভালোবাসে, এক্সেসিভ, নিজের ছাড়া কিচ্ছুই করে না, অন্যদের যে একটা পার্ট থাকতে পারে, এই জিনিসটা বুঝতে পারে, এরকম যদি ফিলিং থাকে তাকে বলা হয় আমরা chauvinism. The pronunciation is like that. So this chauvinism or chauvinism, whatever you may call it, excessive patriotism, that was created after 1950 decades. 1950 সালের পরে যখন এতগুলো দেশ স্বাধীনতা লাভ করলো, তখন বললো যে হোয়াট এভার উই হ্যাভ, আমার দেহে মনে কান্ট্রিতে যা আছে সেটাই আমাদের ভালো। So they started loving their countries so aggressively. So nationalistic attitude came forward, and such kind of aggressive nationalistic attitude is called chauvinism or chauvinism. English literature rode on power as the literature of wartime nationalism. With literature, Englishmen could regroup both to explore and to find some alternatives to the nightmare of the history of the First World War. So Englishmen, with the introduction of the literature, they want to explore. Okay, so an adult person cannot be changed. মানুষকে শিকলে বেঁধে রাখা যায় না, পাখিকে রাখা যায়। এটা করছে, you have to do it by another way. তাকে হয়তো ভালোবাসা দিয়ে অথবা তাকে হচ্ছে কি hypnotize করে। Western kind of literature, we see that this such kind of literature, when they see English literature department all over the world, they got the time and opportunity to push their culture and literature all over the world. Eggleton explanation connects the aspiration of the early comparatives, who tried to transcend and overcome the cultural boundaries and unite the human race through the civilizing power of great literature. Terry Eggleton actually come up with another. He said about ideology. Literature is a part of ideology. Okay, he said that literature has another function. What is the function? That is the civilizing motion. After studying a literature, after studying Macbeth, you want to be Macbeth. After reading Desdemona, you say you want to be Desdemona. After reading other pieces of literature, you will see the culture of other countries and you want to be good. And that is what we study. We learn from studying literature. Really studying literature will make you as good as the characters you have seen in the literature. Simultaneously, that can also happen. You can also be bad, but that is not the notion of literature. So literature and world literature has a mission. That is the civilizing mission. That is Terry Eggleton put. That means great literature in which way you will be putting. That means the literature that will influence other. That means influence other group nations. That is called great literature. But English literature was itself in a crisis of identity. Okay. That means Terry Eggleton wanted to say that yes, English literature has the great civilizing notion or mission. What does it mean? After studying English literature, you can study the culture of England, and England culture is good and in some portion best, so you will be getting acquaintance to the best sort of culture. But English literature had its identity crisis. What is that? Which one we will be calling English literature? কাকে আমরা English literature বলবো? ইংরেজি ভাষায় লেখা হলেই তাকে ইংরেজি লিটারেচার বলবো? Literature produced within the geographical location of England or of the United Kingdom. United Kingdom, there are 4 parts: Scotland, Ireland, England and Wales. And even there is a marked distribution, especially the languages are totally different. Scotland English and England English. Scotland English is called Scottish English, and their culture is also in a way different. And for this reason, many Irish writers, they said that no, I am not English writer, I am Irish writer. W.B. Yeats and others. Yeah. So what is the identity of English literature? That question comes into discussion. Where does the boundary line of literature lie? Next time, literature is কোনো boundary আছে? So where does the boundary line of the popular and mass culture? So this term, which culture you will be called popular? Which culture you will be calling mass culture? আছে কোনো line? Is there any fixed definition? If there is any line that you can call this popular culture and this is mass culture. Once upon a time, England meant Beowulf a text of Virginia Woolf. এক সময় বেওলফ বলতো যে এটা কে লিখেছে, কিন্তু পরবর্তীতে আমরা জানি যে এই রাইটারটা anonymous. So Beowulf is not an English literature then. Okay. So thus to include and exclude from the English literature syllabus, keeping the answer to all these questions, comparative literature can be termed as the emergence of an alternative school of thought. So in such a way, comparative literature, the definition of comparative literature can be defined in such a way that comparative literature introduces an alternative thought. একটা অন্য ধরনের চিন্তার উদ্যোগ করেছিল কি comparative literature, যখন comparative literature নিয়ে সবাই কথা বলেছে। That means you may think in a different way. In such a juncture, Palestine-born American scholar Edward Said, he came forward. He said that the word Orient achieved a wide range of field of meanings, association, connotations, which didn't refer to the real Orient, but refer to the fields surrounding the world. Actually, Oriental, that means the people living in the eastern part of this world. It doesn't mean so. Actually, Orientalism meaning many things, many connotation. Orientalism, that means if we say that you are the Orient, that means it is done in a negative notion. That means they are minor in civilization, minor in culture, in everything. So the term Orient has many connotative meaning. That means a term ta bole onek kishu bojano hoy ei Eastern people there. That is commented by Edward Said. Another Chinese critic. Okay, আমরা আর 5 মিনিট শেষ করে দেব। Another Chinese critic, he said that my myth of the other, China is the eyes of the West, and points out that for the West, China is a land. In the Far East becomes traditionally the image of the ultimate others. Such notion of otherness is challenged by the non-European critics. They say that these colonizing notions are systematically inventing the other cultural studies on the agenda of literary studies. So Chinese scholar also says so. Okay, so in this way, the cultural studies of the other cultural studies or cultural studies become the part of comparative literature. So in such a discussion, the cultural studies become a part of comparative literature. So, and the syllabus of European and non-American literature concern the established canon of great literature, and the syllabus of non-European culture underwent a period of colonizing by the Western powers. Okay, that means there is another analogy. We will be finishing with this analogy. Shakespeare is read in India. So in India, Shakespeare has two identities. One identity that Shakespeare in India has been accepted in two different angles or perspectives. Indian students see Shakespeare as a great figure in European literature as well as a representative of colonial values. So William Shakespeare has two meaning in India. One, the colonial figures, and in presentation of colonial values. In such a way, every literature will have several meaning. Okay, so in this way, comparative literature, the term appeared in the Europe as a result of national struggle, when new boundaries were established, new countries were established. Every country had their own literature, had their own culture. In such a way, apart from the Western and European countries, comparative literature got in foundation in the other parts of the world, that is Indian, African, China, Brazil, Sri Lanka. In these countries, comparative literature got its foundation. And also the national literature came into existence and came into discussion with the inception of comparative literature as a subject at universities. So thank you very much for attending this.